The Iberian Peninsula, which hosts Spain, was once part of the Roman Empire. However, the arrival of Germanic tribes, such as Visigoths and the Vandals, provided a challenge to Roman political rule. Beginning in roughly the year 418, much of the Iberian Peninsula was ruled by Visigothic kingdom. The traditional story is that in the year 711, an oppressed Christian chief, Julian, went to Musa ibn Nusayr, the governor of North Africa, with a plea for help against the tyrannical Visigothic ruler of Spain, Roderick. Musa responded by sending the young general Tariq ibn Ziyad with an army of 7,000 troops. The name Gibraltar is derived from Jabal al-Tariq, which is Arabic for Rock of Tariq. Named after the place where the Muslim army landed, the Muslim army defeated the Visigothic army easily, and Roderick was killed in a battle. After the first victory, the Muslims conquered most of Spain and Portugal with little difficulty, and in fact with little opposition. By 720, Spain was largely under the Muslim control. In 750, the Umayyad Caliphate was taken over by Abbasid Caliphate in the Middle East. However, one Umayyad leader escaped and he set up a new kingdom in Cordoba. Much of Spain at the time had come under the control of the various bands of Muslims. Over time, the Umayyads united these bands under one rule. By 926, the Umayyads had regained control of Al-Andalus and named themselves the Caliphate of Cordoba. In the 10th century, Cordoba, the capital of Umayyad Spain, was unrivaled in both East and the West for its wealth and civilization. The city of Cordoba became one of the greatest cities in Europe, unlike the dark and the dirty cities of most of Europe. Cordoba had wide paved streets, hospitals, running water, and public baths. Scholars from around the Mediterranean traveled to Cordoba to visit the library and to study subjects such as medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and art. When Arthur wrote about Cordoba, there were 500,000 inhabitants, living in 113,000 houses. There were 700 mosques and 300 public baths spread throughout the city and its 21 suburbs. The streets were paved and lit. There were bookshops and more than 70 libraries. Muslim scholars served as a major link in bringing Greek philosophy, of which the Muslims had previously been the custodians, to the Western Europe. The era also produces most of the significant scholars, poets, musicians, philosophers, historians, and the thinkers of the medieval age. The Andalusian Umayyad Caliphate was the golden age of Al-Andalus in terms of political power. The southern two-thirds of Iberian Peninsula were united under the Caliph in Cordoba, in Arabic, Cordoba, and he was also an important player in the North African affairs. It was the Umayyads who, through skill, cleverness, and occasional ruthlessness, laid the foundations for the splendor of Al-Andalus. Between 1009 and 1031, a series of uprisings and succession of weak rulers together led the dissolution of Umayyad state. Filling the vacuum, more than a score of independent petty monarchs emerged, called party kings, or in Arabic, Muluk al-Tawa'if, from the word Tawa'ife, meaning party or faction. Though these rival kingdoms, some no more than states, were much weaker than the unitary Umayyad Caliphate, the Tawa'ifa period witnessed a flourishing of arts and learning as each ruler attempted to outdo the others in the prestige of his court. As David Vessetian points out in The Rise and the Fall of the Party Kings, the profusion of the ruler also meant a profusion of patrons, so artists, scholars, scientists could find a sponsor, or even competing sponsors with relative case. Weakened by the chronic infighting, treacherous double-dealing, and internal decadence, the Tawa'ifa kings gave up considerable territory to the Christian kingdoms that were reasserting themselves in the north of the peninsula. By 1085, the Castilians had taken the crucial city of Toledo, and the petty kings asked the new Almoravid ruler in Morocco, Yusuf ibn Tashufin, to intervene. The Almoravids were a puritanical dynasty that has arisen among the Berbers of the far southern Morocco, and for a time they were content to assist the Tawa'ifa kings militarily But in 1090, Yusuf decided that his erstwhile hostess had to go, and the petty kings were swept aside. The Almoravids at first imposed their Puritanism and religious orthodoxy, visible in their art. But in the end, though their faith remained pure, they themselves succumbed to the luxury and ease of Al-Andalus. The Almoravids' flattering strength provided the Christian kingdoms with opportunities for reconquest, and by 1145, Almoravid Spain was reeling. The Muslim population rose in revolt, and a new group of Tawaifa monarchs asked Al-Muwahhids, another puritanical movement from southern Morocco, which supplanted Almoravids in the North Africa, to intervene. The Almowahhids willingly obliged, and for a time the new North African rulers enjoyed some success in Spain, but the tide turned in the favor of the Christians in 1212 at the Battle of Al-Aqab, called in Spanish Los Navos de Tolosa, and within decades the Almoravids had retreated back across the Straits of Gibraltar. Muslim cities fell one after another until 1260, when only the Kingdom of Granada remained. Muslim rule over Al-Andalus came to an end in 1492, with the conclusion of the Reconquista, a century-long campaign by Christian states aimed at recapturing the territories that had previously been taken by the Muslim forces. Muslims and the people of Muslim origin had lived relatively unmolested in the Christian areas before the fall of Granada, and continued to do so immediately after. The city's inhabitants received generous terms of submission and a large degree of religious freedom in 1499. However, the Catholic monarch's guarantees were broken, and forced conversion of the Muslims was instituted. Queen Isabella I of Castile and the King Ferdinand II of Aragon initiated the Spanish Inquisition, aimed at re-establishing Catholic orthodoxy across the kingdoms. After royal decrees in 1492 and 1502, Jews and Muslims were ordered to convert to Christianity or leave Spain. The era of tolerance, peace, and coexistence had come to an end, and even the descendants of those Muslims who did convert to the Christianity known as Moricos were expelled from the country by the King Philip in 1609. Although Muslim rule in Spain had ended, the rich cultural and intellectual legacy of Al-Andalus survived, both in the Iberian Peninsula and throughout the world. Elements of Islamic heritage can be found throughout Spain, and in recent years, modern Spain has become more aware and more proud of the glories of this period of its history. Many place names, such as those of the port city of Algeciras, the Guadalquivir River, and the southern region of Al-Andalus itself, all come from the Arabic used in Al-Andalus. Some of Spain's most famous architectural monuments, including Cordoba's Great Mosque, Seville's Giralda, and Granada's Alhambra, date from the Muslim period. Architecture in southern Spain and Latin America borrows a great deal from Muslim builders, both in terms of materials used, tile, stucco, and design. Elements like central courtyards, abstract ornamentation, and creative use of water and fountains. The works of many of the most prominent thinkers and practitioners of Al-Andalus, along with writings from the Eastern Muslim world, were translated from Arabic into Latin by Spaniards. Through these translations, philosophical and scientific thought from the Greek and the Roman worlds, preserved and expanded upon by Muslim scholars, passed into European consciousness to fuel both the Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment. Nevertheless, it was back in the Arab and the Muslim worlds that Andalusian culture and society had their greatest impact. Even before 1492, many important contributors in Islamic intellectual history came from or worked in Islamic Spain. No account of the development of philosophy in Islam is complete without a discussion of Ibn Tufayl, who died in 1185, and of his pupil Ibn Rushd. In medicine, Al-Andalus produced scholars like Al-Zahrawi, who wrote extensively on surgery, pharmacology, medical ethics, and the doctor-patient relationship. Ibn Zuhr, a century and a half later, was an advocate of clinical research and practical experimentation. In literature, Ibn Hazm expanded traditional romantic poetry with his Taqwa al-Hamama, Dow's necklace, which expounds on the various forms of chivalric love and joys and sorrows it produced. The courtly Mawashas form of poetry passed from Al-Andalus into North Africa and influenced the development of both literature and music in Maghreb. The classical music of North Africa, which remains popular, is still known as Andalusian music. Spain's intellectual, cultural, and aesthetic contributions aside, however, Al-Andalus left a bittersweet emotional legacy to the Arab and the Muslim world. Though the sense of loss is most pronounced in descendants of the Andalusian exiles, the memory of Al-Andalus retains its emotive power throughout the Islamic world.